All right, so picking up where I left off last week, I went ahead and used some hydraulic tubing, some brake line to make this inside curve to define the edge of the bumper there as it comes into the quarter panel. And I'm starting to develop both of these pieces of sheet metal that cap off the ends in order to see how everything blends out, starting mostly with the cap on the bottom side, because that is one of the issues that if it doesn't work out, that I have to then back up through this frame and cut things loose. And this is what I have so far, this piece here. And once I get it attached, I'll stand back and let you look at it. It seems to blend the corner the way I had intended to. So we'll go on from here. All right, with that piece tacked into place, I've got it looking pretty much the way I want it to. In other words, following up in this direction, up and then sweeping up and blending in here, and also following this body line in and around here. Now this looks a little crooked only because the sheet metal's got a little bit of cut that goes a little downhill here, but this is in the same plane but a little higher than this rod over here because it's a smaller rod. Now it's time to put this other piece of sheet metal on and look at it as a whole. All right, that's that piece just tacked in. Also, I went ahead and I put this little transitory piece in also to see how that all was going to work out as far as sweeping down from here back into the bumper without that other ledge that I had in there before on the mock-up. Anyway, that's it, and now I gotta go over and rinse and repeat on the other side, and I'll show you that when it's done. All right, so that's this corner over here completed, welded up, and ground down. So that's what that looks like once it's all put together with the addition of the top piece and everything. Anyway, starting on this lower piece over here, and it's a bit tricky in the sense that this it sweeps around in a slight curve in this direction, but it also sweeps in a curve in this direction. So if you just simply roll the sheet metal right here, you can get it to curve around here, and you can get it to curve around there just by shrinking the edges of the sheet metal. But what will happen is as you roll it, that roll will want to roll in flat shape. So I'll show you what I mean. Basically, in this quick mock-up, I did just that. I shrunk the edges of that portion of the panel so that it rolls over in this way. Of course, you can see it's pretty exaggerated at the bottom. It also rolls pretty good at the bottom. It's actually a little bit too much. But as you come up to the roll itself here, transition, it's pretty much dead flat in that area. So in order to get that shape to be rolled, and continue to be rolled, I have to take the blank and put it on the English wheel and basically get a little bit of a dome shape going here in the center. So now when I roll it between my two marks, hopefully this curvature will be across the entire panel, not just the bottom and the top, and then flattening out in the middle. Anyway, it's one of those things where you have to do it before you know what you got, so it's kind of a guesswork deal. All right, so we're temporarily clecoed on there. So I've got a curve on the bottom of this thing. I've got a curve going around in this direction, and also there's a curve now, as you can see, in this raised portion right here, which normally would flatten out from point to point if you just rolled it and then made it conform to these two curves, the upper and lower curve. So it's a hunt and peck thing. Got to wheel it, put it on there, bend it up, put it on there, see if it fits. If it's not enough dome, take it back off, wheel it out again, that type of thing. But anyway, that's what it looks like when it's done. Okay, I've had a couple people ask me to show them what I'm doing when I'm doing some English wheeling. So basically, I'm not a big expert at this. There's some guys who could really make magic out of these machines. It's pretty simple. All it is a very heavy wheel on a top that's flat. There's some crown dollies, but basically the only thing that's different between the dollies is there's a radius on them, and the center is actually flat, and then it has a gradual radius going off. So it's flat to flat, and what's happening here is the difference between the dies is the width of this flat portion here. So if you're trying to get a high crown, there's a narrow 1/8 inch, and then they work all the way up to probably about 3/4 of an inch of a flat to smooth out a lot of the ripples in a panel. Anyway, what's happening here is you got to think of the metal as putty, and what this is doing is it's squeezing it down and spreading it out in a narrow path. So there's techniques for doing this, but what I end up doing a lot of times is I just, if I want an area to be raised more than the perimeter, is I start working that area first, and then I spread out further and further to the extents. That means that I pass this point once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, but each one of these is only 1 time over here, then 1 time over here, so that there's more material spread out in this area here than there is in the adjoining areas as I go forward. So this becomes, every time I pass over this center spot, it raises up a little bit more than this area, this area, this area. So then you have to work your way out to the edges, and then finally planish out the entire panel with a wide dolly to try and average it out and relax everything out. But what I'm trying to achieve here is I'm trying to create a bubble in the panel here, so that when I roll my panel for my roll pan on the bottom side, that I'll have a curve in it, as I just showed you on the last panel. But basically, now I've worked this area to this side already, and as you can see, I'm going further and further out, and each time I go out, it crosses over the center where I've already done it, intensely in the beginning. You can see this over here, and then I work my way out to the edge, to a very small path, and then I work my way back into the center, sweeping larger and larger and larger until I get to the center where I want the most shape, and I really get that going. Doesn't take a whole lot. As you can see, there's already a bubble in the panel just from a couple of passes. And of course, there's a kick wheel on the bottom that tightens the gap between these 2 wheels as you go, because as you go, the metal thins out, and so you've got to kind of gradually keep applying a little bit more pressure if you want it to continue to spread and create a lot of shape. Anyway, I just thought I'd show you a little bit of that. All right, with the 2 pieces of roll pan attached here and there, it's time to fill in this panel here. Now, the panel's got a curve to it in this direction, obviously, but again, I wanted to put a little bit of shape in this, so I just wheeled it with a flattish dolly just to kind of bring it up so that hopefully it's not too flat top to bottom. I want a little bit of curve top to bottom, just so that it kind of holds tension. When I weld it, it's going to add a lot of heat, and it's going to shrink the edges. And what happens if you've got just a flat panel is it'll start sucking little dents into it, and then you end up having to use a lot of filler on there. Hopefully this gives it a little bit of a bubble, a little bit of a rigidity to where it just kind of tightens up without doing that. So in between welding this up over here, very tedious 1/8 of an inch by 1/8 of an inch project over there, I'm making this piece up with the lens in to make sure it's centered up and it's at the right angle, plus that it has a nice gap about 1/8 of an inch away from the lens itself. So now that I've got that piece established, I can take the lenses back out, get them out of harm's way, and I can proceed with some of this center construction. All right, so I got that side welded up, ground off, slowly stitching this together. giving the welder a break right now, and got this panel tacked on, and I am getting ready to cut out a clearance in this area here because this light that illuminates the license plate over here will have to stick up in through this pocket. It won't be attached to this panel. There'll be a panel underneath here, but I have to make sure that there's enough clearance on the top side for this thing to plug in and then snap up in there. And then, of course, this is going to get built up. But got to get that clearance before I forget about it. All right. Tiny hiccup. This when I took these clicos out, these top clicos, which are holding this up snug. I was hopeful that by the time I got this much sheet metal welded up nice and solid, that this would all just hold its shape based on my bumper mounts and this lower mount. But this wants to rotate out. It's not much. It's not even 1/8 of an inch, but it shows up big time in this seam here when the bumper rolls out. So I have to come up with a way to tie this back to the car. I've got a couple ideas, and I'll show you what I come up with if it works. I'll show you if it doesn't work too. All right, so this is what I'm going to try. First thing I did was, you remember this thing has an armature of 3/8 tubing, and it's pretty thick wall, it's 065 wall, so it's pretty substantial. So I went ahead and I drilled a pilot hole through the bumper itself. There's a flat flange in there. It's about 30 inches up, and I wanted to hit the flat flange with the pilot hole, and I did. So the next thing is to I got some 3/8 tubing, and I basically threw it in a piece of aluminum L channel, cleaned up the edges, and I have these little threaded bungs I just happen to have in a pile of stuff. The other option for me would have been to either weld a nut on it and then grind it off the same diameter, or to actually thread this rod, which probably would have worked because it's got a pretty thick wall, this tubing. Anyway, so then what I came up with is now this has a threaded end on it. Okay, so this 1/4-20 will wind into the end of that. What I'm just trying to do is just trying to tie this back so it doesn't move in and out. So now I've oversized the hole to 3/8 tubing, and I'll throw this thing here in like this. Here I'm hitting that flange in the back there. I'll go on the other side, widen that hole out until I can get this 1/4-20 threaded in and hold it in place. And I'll cut it off here and weld it up. That won't be substantial enough. Once the bumper's back off of the car, I will weld it a little more substantially around here, where there's 3/8 tubing here and there's also 3/8 tubing here. So I'll kind of triangulate the weld in behind here, and then I'll weld up this front hole over here on the face, and hopefully that'll basically tie it to that flange and keep it from coming in and out once these clicos are in. Anyway, see how that goes. Okay, so you can see the 1/4-20 bolt going through this flange right here with a washer, and so this is right underneath this taillight housing here, so there'll be one on the other side also to hold that end. I'll show you what it looks like on the outside. Alright, I haven't welded it up or ground it off yet, but that's what it looks like on the outside. Clico is out, and now the bumper doesn't want to move in or out, so because it's held firmly against that flange on the inside. And I got to rinse and repeat on the other side. All right, so the next thing I had to do is I had to build a starter box for the license plate enclosure. So while it's on the bench, it's a whole lot easier to do a lot of this detailing here, which I put a couple of weld nuts on the back side here to attach the license plate with. And also I cut the hole for the light housing over here, so that just pops up inside here. So now that I've got all that and I've got these corners welded up, I can start fitting it up in the hole, knowing that this is all going to be good to go. And I can also check for my clearances on that other upper panel to make sure that, you know, I've got enough clearance to put wiring and so forth in there. Right, so I'm starting to close this shape in. This has been installed, welded all the way around the perimeter, and I've got a little bottom flange here. When I finish it out, I've still got to do the roll pan back to the flange in the back, the attachment flange. But here you can see what I was talking about clearing out, so I make sure that the housing has enough room for the wires to pass through on the top side. I'm just going to clear out just a little bit more here before I close this in, just to make sure that there's no problems plugging the plug in. But anyway, I've got this 1/4-inch hydraulic tubing here that I'm just starting to define the sides of this inset for the license plate. And once I get this finalized here, I'm going to take some sheet metal and wrap it around here and then on the inside here, and then I'll face it off. Anyway, that's what I'm up to right now. All right, that's what the side closures for the license plate area look like. It's time to put the rest of the roll pan up in the center now. Got that figured out and back sprayed with some weld through primer. Just keep digging till I get this done. Okay, so I went ahead and I added a piece of 035 to the top right here that corresponds with the back piece as far as the profile is concerned. Made sure that I kept it in the same plane as this face of the bumper all the way around. Then I added a piece of 3/8 tubing. I'm going to split the difference right here. It's right at the midpoint. So I'm going to have to weld this up, grind it off also. Then the last thing that will happen here is I've got to, this is just a sample piece, but I've got to make up a piece out of 035 to cap this whole center section off here. And I'll show you all of that when that's done. All right, so that finishes up most of the main shape of the rear bumper. The next thing I have to concentrate on is the exhaust tip outlets at the bottom. I've got to get the ones off of the Hellcat, and then I've got to make up a rig that represents how they'll be sitting on the lower valance here. And so that's what I'll be up to next. All right, with the exhaust tips scavenged out of the Challenger, I've gone ahead and set up this rig, which is pretty simple. It's just a piece of 1/8-inch angle aluminum, so it's pretty stout. Clamped it to the end of my adjustable body stands here, and the exhaust tips are spaced out. There's a center line here. They're corresponding to where they were in the Challenger. And so now I'm going to drop this down, bring it back up behind here, and slowly remove the material I need to slide these through and clearance them and get them decked out where they need to be. There is a little bit more, there's some forgiveness in these tips in that there is it's like a ball socket here that you could loosen and turn these a little bit if you need to tweak them to get them just right. So that's what I'm up to next. Okay, so there's the exhaust tips cut into the bottom of the rear roll pan at the bottom of the bumper. They're about 50-50. Just held in there with some temporary pieces to just hold them where they're located right there, just to eyeball them and visualize everything I got going here. Now I have to work on finishing out those openings a little bit better. Just raw sheet metal right now, just trimming them out to get the locations right. But anyway, that's what they're looking like. On to the next thing. I just thought I'd show you the back side of this thing while I've got it off the car, so you see what it ended up looking like back here. I had to come back in here, and these were those stobs that I had to add to draw the top back in. And you see I had to weld them back up right around in this area. Went back and welded up all these joints that I couldn't get to from the front side when I was assembling this, so that all of this skeleton behind here is all firmed up over here. And also I had to weld these two pieces of sheet metal together here, which I couldn't access that when it was on the car, so it's all welded together there now. That's one piece. I have to add some reinforcement around the opening now for the exhaust tips. Now you can see I've bent this out at a slight angle all the way around here, try and give it a little bit of a character line so it doesn't just look like it's an unintentional cut, you know, just a flat cut. So this has a little bit of a feature to it now. So I'm going to be adding a little bit of tubing around there to stiffen that up, and then we'll go on from there. Okay, so I've dusted it with a little white primer and just remounted it with a couple of bolts. I've mocked up the exhaust tips as they protrude from the bottom of the bumper cover, and just so I could see any obvious flaws. There's a few things I have to sweeten up here and there, but for the most part, it's where I need it to be, or where I'd like it to be, as far as following the lines of the existing sheet metal, blending down in this area here. So one other issue to tackle is going to be the proximity sensors, or the parking assist sensors. There's 4 of them across the back bumper of the Hellcat. I'll show you that right over here. They are in this lower valence area. The problem with them is they have to be mounted flush. You can't have them like in a tunnel, or they'll sense the tunnel as interference. But as you can see, the angle of the bumper comes down, and then it corrects back in what amounts to be a 5-degree upwards tilt. And that's so that it sees objects probably about knee height, you know, bumpers, other car bumpers and things like that. So you can't mount these on this, say, this upper section, because the sensors will be directed down towards the ground, and they'd be going off, basically picking up the ground. So obviously I don't want to make a bumper that was angled out at that angle. So the question becomes how to mount them in this other bumper. So that has to be resolved yet. I hooked everything up to see if it was a problem with deleting the sensors. These are the 4 wires that hook the sensors up. And the only thing that happens is you get a message on the dashboard that tells you that your parking assist is unavailable, that you need to see your dealer, and all that other good stuff. And it also comes up when you pull the car into reverse. The little message comes up. So you could delete them. It doesn't interfere with the way the car runs, starts, drives. There's nothing on the dashboard while you're driving until you put the car in reverse. So at any rate, one of the ideas is to have the sensors come out at an angle like this and protrude so that they pick up that 5-degree angle, and that they're flush at the top, but then they stick out a little bit at the bottom. But I'm not so sure that's going to look so great. Don't know if the sensors can be painted. They're in an unpainted part of the car on the rubber bumper. So that's a question I have to still answer, whether or not we can do this or not. At any rate, that's the majority of it. It was quite the project, so we'll go on from here. I appreciate everybody watching, and we'll see you on the next one, which, by the way, next week's going to be a little bit of a short one. I have a little bit of a short week. I have some personal business to take care of, so we're going to be missing a couple of days next week. At any rate, thanks for watching.